I have met so many people who have wanted to write a book, wanted to become an author, wanted to craft something and put it out in the world. But the movement from idea into action has just paralyzed them. They've stopped. And I felt that way many times in my life where I thought I had a big idea, but there were so many options and paths and so much information out there that it stopped me in my tracks and held me back. And I am so excited today to have Chad R. Allen with me, who is a writer, a speaker, an editor, and a writing coach. He's helped tons of writers put their work out into the world and market their books so it gets in the hands of more readers. He's got a 20-year publishing professional career behind him. He's worked with best-selling authors like Michael Hyatt, Caroline Leaf, Mark Batterson, and Phyllis Tickle. And I am so excited to dig into this powerful topic because I know listeners, there are many of you who have the idea of writing a book in your heads and you just haven't started. So, Chad, thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm delighted to be here. Thanks, Mickey.
Now, you've worked with authors in kind of many different phases of the authorship journey, from the publishing all the way into the writing as a coach. Can you tell me a little bit about the most common challenges you see writers at the very beginning of this process that they face?
Yeah, you talked about idea to action. And so sometimes, I mean, there are a number of different problems. One is just getting the words out. That's one. Sometimes even before that, it's how do I develop? I have this idea, but how do I develop a real concept that has legs? And then another issue is everybody's talking about platform. I don't want to write this book and not sell any. So how do I build a platform? So there's kind of three of them that come up regularly.
Yeah, I wonder your thoughts on for anyone who's got that idea and is thinking about writing a book, but they look at their audience or their platform and they think, oh man, I can't sell enough of this. Do you think they should stop the writing process and build the platform first? Do both at the same time? What's your perspective there?
That's a great question. I mean, if everybody would just do what I tell them to do, I would probably have them do some of both week by week, say. Some of them do it day by day. But the reality is there's no one size fits all approach here. Many, many, many writers I work with, they say to me, Chad, it is enough for me to just work on the manuscript. I can't worry about platform. So let me just do the manuscript and then I'll get to the platform later. And that's perfectly fine. I would just say, whether you are going after a traditional book deal or you're self-publishing, leave some time for building up a platform. Leave at least 90 days, right? For
Yep.
building up a platform before you launch so that you have a base of support. You have an audience that's been hearing from you regularly for a while before you launch. Because my sense is the best launches come from authors who've been serving a community for a period of time.
I love that perspective. And I think there are so many kind of cookie cutter pieces of advice given out there to authors and to everyone in general. So I like the idea of you have to do what's best for you, but also you can't
Mhm.
skip this really important step.
Right, right, exactly. That's
So
it.
you
Yeah.
mentioned traditional publishing and hybrid, and of course there's self-publishing as well. So for someone who maybe isn't quite familiar with what those are and how they impact the writing process, do you mind giving us a little bit of a rundown?
Sure. Self-publishing is, and there are pros and cons with each model, and I'm a fan of all three. It just depends on what your goals are. Self-publishing is pretty self-explanatory. It's when you take on all the all the work of creating a book. It might involve hiring other people, but you're the one managing the hiring. That's self-publishing, classically understood. Then there's hybrid publishing, which is when you hire sort of an intermediary who helps you with different parts of the process, whether it's the editing or the cover design or the interior design or the marketing or some combination of all of those. And then traditional book deals are when a publisher pays you an advance in royalties for your manuscript and they handle everything. All you have to do is write the manuscript, although they certainly expect authors to be involved in the marketing after the book releases. So those are the three models. And I'd say that the major pros, the major pluses for each model are with self-publishing, you have complete control over everything, and the percentage of every sale is the highest with self-publishing. Plus, you can go to market really fast when you're self-publishing. With hybrid publishing, you have a team that's with you. Let me do pros and cons for each. So the cons of self-publishing is you're on your own. You gotta figure it out. Hopefully you have some people who've done it before or who can give you advice, because there are definitely some things to figure out along the way. That would be the con of, and then distribution can sometimes be more limited with self-publishing. We all know that Amazon is the big gorilla in this space, but there's actually quite a few other outlets for selling books than Amazon. And when you're self-publishing, it can be difficult to get into all of those outlets. With hybrid publishing, the plus is you have a team, so you're not on your own. You can go quicker to market with a hybrid publisher. The con is it's often quite expensive to have. So I always encourage writers, if you're thinking about hybrid publishing, make sure you do your homework in the same way that you wouldn't just immediately hire the first contractor who came your way to put on an addition on your house. You'd interview people, you'd get references, you get multiple quotes. I would take that approach to hybrid publishing. And then traditional publishing, the plus there is you're with a team of professionals, you're getting paid and upfront instead of paying for the process yourself. The con is it's another pro would be they have the best distribution of the three models typically. A con would be it takes longer. You have to get the book deal, with self-publishing and hybrid publishing. And some hybrid publishers are more selective than others, but if you show up with a check, you can generally get a hybrid publisher interested. But with traditional publishing, you've got to write a proposal and get them interested in you and get the book deal. And the other con of traditional publishing is it takes a while because of how they sell books into their accounts. The timeline is a little more extended to allow for that.
I think as you're saying that too, I can see how a writer, especially at the start of this, if they don't have a large audience, a large platform, and they don't have a ton of experience in this process, how simple the idea of going the self-publishing route is. I have control. I can pick, find one person or two people who I trust and go through this process and kind of figure it out on my own. And then with the hybrid, you're right, like there is a big investment. And
Mhm.
I have like I think there's obviously time investment regardless. You're writing a book.
Right, right,
Like, you have to take that time. But I think with the hybrid publishing, I think when you have the team of people around you, like you're investing in experts to help you through the process and potentially speed up and reduce some of those mistakes you might make. But again, there's risk and investment put in there. So I think kind of like the golden nugget is if you can get a traditional publishing deal and it's feasible, that's kind of the bar you likely want to aim for. Otherwise, you're likely
right.
looking at one of the other two options.
Yeah,
Am
I
I
mean, I
correct?
self-published a book, but it was because I wanted to get it out fast and because
Yeah.
I used it mainly as a lead magnet, you know. So there's a really good reason to self-publish. But if
Yeah.
I'm going to write a full-length book that I am pursuing as a commercial product in the marketplace, my first pursuit would be a traditional book deal. That would be my first choice mainly because of the distribution. That really is a big factor. So, and you get the good packaging, the good design and all of that with it. But the reason traditional publishers still exist is because they provide value in the process. If they didn't, they wouldn't exist anymore, but they do. And so as much as you can hear people, especially people involved in the self-publishing industry, as much as they throw mud at traditional publishers, the reason there's something to throw mud at is because they're doing some good work in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think maybe even chatting a little bit more on the instances when each of those might be a good option. So you mentioned for people maybe who are building a book as a lead magnet or as a tool for their business, it's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily like a massive,
Right. Right.
massive piece that they're creating into the world. Self-publishing can be a great option. Are there any other circumstances where self-publishing is like typically the go-to?
If you know exactly what you want the title to be, the
Mm,
cover, you don't want people meddling with your words. If you want 100% absolute control over your project, why get anybody else involved? Just do it yourself.
yeah, that makes a lot of
That would
sense.
be another reason. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we spoke a bit about traditional, right? If you're going to create a piece, right? Like it is your work of art, your product, and it's
Right.
it's a go-to-market piece. That's typically when you're going to go to a traditional publisher. And then I assume there's kind of some crossover in the middle there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are some people who they're just really not comfortable doing it on their own. It's too
Mm,
overwhelming to think about hiring a book designer, hiring an editor, like all of that's super overwhelming. They don't want to handle it. And yet they don't think they have the platform, for example, to pursue a traditional publisher, to woo a traditional publisher or an agent to their project. So, but they have some cash, they have some money to invest in a hybrid publisher, then that can make a lot of sense. And I have spoken with writers. I've spoken with writers on both sides, writers who feel like they were taken to the cleaners and they paid a whole lot of money and didn't see much in the way of results. And then I've heard from writers who are quite happy with how the hybrid publisher, serviced them. So it does vary.
Yeah, I loved your contractor example because I think that's a really like a really clear example of I don't have to know everything about drywall or foundations to be able to look and research and find somebody who's reputable, who's got good reviews, who's, you know, word of mouth, that sort of thing. So I think you have to do your due diligence regardless of which option you choose.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. Yeah.
So when we're
Yeah.
thinking of the writing process, I've got an idea in my head, right? I have a concept, but I'm not really sure, as you mentioned, getting to that place where I feel like it's got legs. I can actually
Yeah.
craft it fully into maybe an outline or a full kind of
Mm.
narrative, whatever that might be. Do you have any like a specific process or any tips or tricks for those of us who maybe have the idea, but we're not really sure how to put anything to it?
Yeah, the first step is to decide who your audience is.
Mm,
And this doesn't have to be super complicated. It's usually right underneath your nose. Who's your audience? Is it entrepreneurs? Is it moms? Is it moms of young children? Is it somebody who's just lost a loved one? So there are different ways of describing an audience, whether it's demographics or psychographics. But typically, when I work with a writer, they don't have too much trouble figuring out who their audience is. The next step is a little more difficult, and that is, what's the problem you solve for them? And so, what is that? And how would they describe the problem? And what is it that they don't know that you do know, like about solving that problem? Because it might be that they think the problem is one thing and actually it's another. So you have to position your book to fix thing A, when actually, if you're really going to help them through the course of the book, you got to get them to thing B. So great concepts are concepts that sell themselves, and those they tend to fix problems. Books are products, and why do we buy products? We buy products to fix problems. So what problem does your book fix? And this even applies to fiction, because fiction solves the problem of, I want to be entertained, but we're awfully picky about our entertainment, which is why Netflix has thousands of shit. That's why it's such a joke when people say I finished Netflix, right? Because it's impossible. There's so much. Why? Because we're picky about our entertainment. So each of those shows on Netflix and each of those genres in fiction represent a different kind of problem. And of course, that's true for nonfiction. So a great concept meets a real need that real people really have. It's not about the need you think they have, it's about the need they think they have. And so when you start to figure out who your audience is and you get into their minds around how they understand the problem, what they're looking for, and then develop a title and subtitle that speaks to that need really clearly, now you've got a concept. Now you've got something that will be attractive in the marketplace. And once you have that, you start there. I have 5 different ways of structure, of working on the structure of a book, and I can share just a couple of them. One is like a brainstorming or mind mapping method, where you put the main topic in a circle in the center of a piece of paper. And I recommend using a piece of paper for this. So let's say it's active listening. I'm writing a book on active listening, and so I put that in the center, and then I'm going to write topics related to that around that center. So it might be, I don't know enough about active listening to even offer any, but like, maybe environment is important, or echoing back to somebody what they just said, or I don't know, body posture, when you're listening. So each of those then represents, and maybe some get clustered with others, but eventually you end up with a chapter outline with that process. Another process is, imagine you're going to do a 10-session seminar on this topic. So if your audience is entrepreneurs, maybe it's a a seminar that you're doing. If your audience is moms, maybe you're doing it for a MOPS group or something. But you imagine I'm going to deliver this content live over whatever, 7 to 10 sessions. How would you break it down? How would you help them go through the process? That can be a useful way to get at a chapter structure. So, and I have a blog post on this called, if you just go to chadrallen.com and type in book structure, you'll find this. There are 5 different ways that I go through on how to structure your book.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll link it in the description as well for the listeners so you can snag that really quickly. Um, the thing that, like, the one thing that really stood out to me as you were talking there was the idea of the reader doesn't know all the things I do. And I
Mm,
kind of have to sell them what they want and give them what they need, almost is the way we
exactly.
look at it from marketing, right?
Yeah,
You have to give
exactly.
them what they want, which might not necessarily be what you actually are teaching, or like you have to cater to where they are in that stage of that reader's journey.
Yeah, I
I
mean,
there's a lot of
a
alignment
quick
there.
yeah, a quick example comes to mind. Like if I were to write a book on how to get a book deal,
Mm.
that is often the need that people who are interested in traditional publishing come with. I want a book deal. Give me a book deal. Well, so that's how I would structure, that's how I would posture or frame the title. That's the way I would, yeah, frame up the concept. But what they actually need to get a book deal is it's 3 things: concept, crowd, and craft, the 3 C's, but mainly platform. The number one reason publishers turn books down is too small a platform. So I would market the book as here's how you get a book deal, but inside the book I would devote a lot of content to here's how you build a platform. So
Mm.
that's just an example of that kind of thing. Yeah.
I love that. I think it really, that example is really clear. And I think it shows, although you might have that idea or that concept, the process of mapping it out and going through the problem that they experience. And as they're like those pieces, I find that mind mapping, as you said it, I was picturing myself thinking of active listening. And I think it really did clarify, okay, there are different levels of problems or pieces of problems that they're going to face as well here that I have to get in there, not
Mhm.
just the main one. So I think that's really helpful for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And then you can even, if you have a first layer of circles around the center circle, you could have a second layer shooting off from those circles that you can drill down a little bit on each one of those subtopics.
When you move to
Yeah,
the whiteboard, right? From the little paper to the big board.
exactly. Yeah. I need a little more space here. Yeah.
Just a little. Now, so once someone has kind of this mapping stage done, they've got the idea or the concept, they've got a basic outline from there. Something that you mentioned was the 3 C's. Can we just
Mhm.
briefly walk through those together?
Sure. Yeah, concept, crowd, and craft. So concept is, we kind of covered that, meets a real need real people really have. Crowd is your platform. How do you build a platform? You and I have talked about the importance of an email list, and there are all sorts of tactics that I take writers through, which I just have to, I can't resist saying that I love helping writers do that because I love helping writers bridge this gap in their minds and helping them get the audience that their work deserves. And then craft is, how well is the book written? Is it is it is it so well written we don't want to put it down? That's the ideal. So those are the really, I think of those as the ingredients to publishing success. If you have a great concept, you have a strong platform, and it's well written, then it's very likely you'll get a book deal if you want one. And if you don't want one, you'll sell a lot of copies. And you'll sell a lot of copies either way if you have those 3 things.
I love that. I think the simplicity is, I'm all about simplicity. How can we make this
Yeah.
simpler? Because I think
Yeah.
we overcomplicate everything, and that's the thing that stops us from taking action. So they've got the concept. Now we move into kind of the platform area. How do we get
Right.
them, or how do authors begin to? And I know you mentioned email lists. We're going to just nerd out here on building that platform that they're going to sell their book to or give their book to. Can we talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to. I was just talking with a writer about this earlier today, and he was saying that he has 12 people on his email list, but he has a website. So I said, you're further ahead than a lot of people. You have a
Mhm.
website and you've got an email list started. Like, that is fantastic. So, and then we were talking about how he starts growing that email list. And I said, here's the thing. You already know people. He's been in a career for a while. And I said, you know more than 17 people. So the first step is replicating in your email list the network that you actually have. And
Mm.
the objection I always get is, oh, but those people aren't my target audience. And I always say back to people, yeah, but they're connected to people who are. And because they know you and like you, they're willing to share, just because they know you and like you, that they're willing to share your content out there so that you can reach to your target audience. So the first step, and imagine, here's a great analogy, or at least it's been a helpful one for me. Imagine opening a restaurant, and you've worked on this restaurant, you've dialed in the menu, you've got the staff, you've got the ingredients to deliver amazing food. And anytime somebody you know comes to your restaurant, you tell them no, they're not welcome. Like,
Shut
what?
the door. Bye.
Like, of course you would start with all the people you know, but for some reason, when we think about building a platform for our writing, it's like, oh, it doesn't count if I know them. What? No, those are some of the most important people to get on your list. So, and you can grow. I've seen many writers grow their list into the hundreds with just that method. And all it takes is, frankly, you can start with your phone. You can start with texting 5 people a day and saying, hey, Sarah, I'm starting this project where I do such and so. Want in? And when Sarah writes back, of course I want in. Why didn't you told me about this sooner? Because they do. That's the kind of thing they say. You say, great, what's your best email? Boom, there's your email. And you can do that on Facebook direct message, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, email. Go to your sent items of your email. Look at the people that you've emailed over the past couple of weeks, who's not on your list, who knows you and likes you, and send them a note, And it's not glamorous work, right? It's not writing the great American novel. It's not writing, Atomic Habits. But it is really helpful and important work to do. And so I always tell people, put on your favorite show on Netflix and just do it while you're watching your show. Make it as fun as it possibly can, because it will yield dividends.
I love that advice. In my experience, going from 0 to 1 is the hardest jump when you're first getting started. But once you get a few people in, you can start to kind of dial in the process. And as much as like as a marketer, I would love to say there's an easy button or a hack that makes this all easy for you. Unfortunately, there isn't. We call it affinity marketing, where like you start with the lowest hanging fruit. Who are the people who like you, who you know
Right.
personally, and then who do they know, and
Yes.
then who do they know?
Yes.
And you have
Yeah.
to work through that process, especially at the beginning, because otherwise you are missing out on all the people who already know, like, and trust you, and you're going straight to cold leads, as we call them, or people who don't know and like and trust you yet. And now you have to
Yeah.
build a relationship from scratch instead of getting a
So
warm
much harder.
welcome from a
Yeah.
bunch of people who already like you.
Yeah. 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 And I think what we all wish was true is we could flip a switch and people would just show up on our email list and they were qualified and they were good leads and so on and so forth. But I'll tell you, I can't offer that. I don't think anyone can. But what I can offer is not a silver bullet, but a method that works. It does require some effort, but it works. And so, like you said, like once you get started and you start to get those encouraging replies, like from people who say, why haven't you told me about this sooner? Of course I went on your list. And by the way, you should tell such and so too. She's really interested in that. Like that's the kind of stuff you get back. Then that kind of motivates you to keep going. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love it. I love it. So after we've got those initial people onto our list, I think so my clients, one of the biggest concerns or challenges they have when we first start talking with them is, I just don't know what to send. How do I
Mm,
stay in contact? What kind of emails am I sending these people? I'm already spending all this time writing the book, and now I have to write something different. What kind
yeah.
of advice or tips do you give to people to start nurturing that list?
This is another one of my favorite topics. So you'll hear in this space the know, like, and trust thing. You'll hear we want to take them from is it followers, fans to friends or
Yeah.
something like that, that kind of thing. And so much of that is just about being human.
Mm.
It's just about showing up in there. First of all, make sure you deliver whatever freebie that they've asked for. That's important. And then over the course of, say, 4 emails in a welcome sequence, showing up with value, making it really low key, asking them a simple question that gets them to reply, so that helps your deliverability. Like, I think of all those things for your welcome sequence. But then on a weekly basis, I mean, there's just so many ideas. Obviously, if you're regularly producing a podcast or a blog post, you can link to those things. But that can get people bogged down. They feel like, oh my goodness, if I don't have a blog post, I can't email my list. And that's not true. You can talk about what's going on with your business lately. What's a tool? Like, I was just thinking, here's my favorite pen. Will you put this on YouTube, or is it just a recording? I
Yeah,
can't
I'll put it
remember.
on YouTube for sure.
Okay. So this is the Friction, Frixion Clicker '07 pen. I like blue ink, and I like it because it's erasable, but it's not
Mm.
erasable the way pens were erasable 10 years ago. Like, it really does erase, and it's clean. And this is my favorite pen. I should do a little video, a 2-minute video on this pen, link to it, maybe with an affiliate link, and email that to my list. There's so many people that would be like, oh, wow. And it's not that expensive. It's like, I mean, there are really expensive pens out there. This is not one of them. And so it's the simple things like that.
Mhm.
I just joined a list with a lady she's vegan. I'm interested in plant-based eating. And her first couple of emails are like, use herbs. Here's a recipe, just really simple. So I think we can get all up in our heads about this. And I will say too, a great resource is Liz Wilcox. When it
Yes.
comes to email marketing,
Yes.
she is brilliant, partly because it's just simple. She keeps
Yeah.
it really simple.
She's been
She
on
shows
this
up
show,
every.
so listeners, you can always go back after listening to this episode, go back a few and find Liz's episode on the show. She's fantastic. I love
Oh,
Liz.
I want to listen to that myself.
Yeah,
She's a
she's
hoot for
spectacular.
one
Oh
thing. She's
my gosh.
hysterical. She has
90s trivia out like
yeah,
it's nothing.
such great
Oh,
energy. And
hmm
then when you sign up for her cheap, I mean, it's an inexpensive membership. It's like $9 a week or something. She shows up in your inbox every week with a template for you to send to your list. It's brilliant. So
hmm
anyway, she's been amazing and very helpful.
Love it. So we've got our list. We're starting to grow it slowly and nurture it slowly. Let's get back to the kind of the writing and the craft part of this, that third
Mm,
C. So for many writers, we see online these like write a book in 90 days or write a book in a week type programs. And it can be a little bit, can set expectations really high for the speed at which we should be able to write a really good book, especially if we're doing it
mm,
by ourselves. But also, like, the amount of books out there on the market is ridiculous at this point. And
mm,
so making your book stand out and really well
mm,
written is super important. So do you have any tips or
mhm.
a framework that we can use to really dial in our craft as we're writing our books?
Yeah, I'll give you my top tip for writing. Imagine all writing exists on a pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid is concrete material. So dialogue, stories, anecdotes, metaphors, quotes, that kind of thing. At the top of the pyramid is abstract material, explanation, discursive material, principles, that kind of thing. Generally speaking, the most engaging content exists on the bottom of the pyramid, and the best communicators push as much as they can to the bottom of the pyramid. That's where the stuff is that's memorable. You think about the most popular TED Talks. I think this applies to speaking as well as writing. If I think about the most popular TED Talks, a lot of them use stories, or they use something that you look at on the screen that's really captivating. That's concrete material. So I'm not the first person to say, think about starting with a story, but that can be really helpful. Metaphors can do a lot of work for you. It takes much less explanatory energy if you have a great metaphor. So that's my number one writing tip for writers: write more on the concrete level if you can. And from there, it's often about, look, a standard length book is 50,000 words. We're not talking about a sprint. We're talking about a marathon. And just as with a marathon, you just have to do the workout after the workout after the workout. That's what you have to do when you're writing a full length manuscript. You have to show up and get your words in. So I find accountability and community are really helpful for that. I like word count trackers, where you sort of gamify the process of getting your 250 words in each day or whatever it is, and you get to see the graph move upwards to your goal. Those can be really helpful to people. Having a community of people, maybe you do involved in co-working sessions where you all show up via Zoom. And we do this inside Book Camp, my community for writers. We have 12 of these a month where people show up via Zoom. There's a little inspirational word, that everybody shares in the chat room. Here's what I'm working on. You work for an hour, and then at the end you share, here's what I got done, here's what I didn't get done. That can be really helpful. Writing retreats can be really helpful, where you just declare, my writing is worth a weekend away, so I'm getting out of Dodge and I'm doing this. So those are some different tactics that I've seen be
I love
effective.
that. I was a conversion copywriter for the first chunk of my career. And I think of writing copy differently than writing, obviously, for a book. We're a little bit more condensed and dialed in terms of like, I only have 180 characters sometimes
Yeah,
or less.
right.
But I think of the things on my end of what helps me as well. And I think we put a lot of pressure on us to get a really good first draft done, when in reality, like in my experience, first drafts usually are terrible, and that's okay. It's like the
Yes,
10th iteration is where it starts to get good.
exactly. Yeah,
That for
exactly.
me was mind blowing.
Yeah. AJ Harper, in her book Write a Must Read, she says she has this section called It's Just Math. And so she like shows you, if it's 50,000, I'm not a mathematician, so I won't be able to do this in my head. But for the sake of the illustration, if you're trying to write 50,000 words and you can write 1,000 words a day, you need 50 days. So just show up 50 days and write 1,000 words. 1,000 words is a lot to do in one writing session. But, and so that's it. In fact, in her book, like 2/3 of the book is on concept, a little less than a third is on editing, and just a tiny little bit is on writing the first draft, because the advice industry wide is the same. Show up and write, it's like, I don't know, we can say it 1,000 different ways, but that's it.
Oh,
So however
yes.
you can make that
Yes.
easier for yourself. Yeah.
Yes, and AJ Harper was actually on the podcast as well. So if you scroll back, I love that you're name dropping everyone who's been on the show. If you
Yeah,
scroll
yeah.
back, you'll be able to listen to AJ Harper walk through her framework as well. A phenomenal book. As I'm a copywriter, I'm not even an author, and I found it super helpful. Along just being able to dial in the concept for me was really big. But I think as you were talking about showing up every day and that community and accountability aspect, I think especially for those who are in the self publishing realm, or maybe just are not finding that they can show up the way they need to in whichever kind of realm they're in. I think that's probably one of the big missing pieces that a lot of people lack. I know for me, even just in my business, having co-working sessions offsite, like
Mm-hmm.
those can be really, really powerful to be around other people
Mm-hmm.
going through the same thing. So I think writing is almost an isolating experience sometimes, at least for me it
Yes.
was. When we're looking for other people to build that kind of community, get that accountability? Are there things we should be looking for, types of people, circumstances, situations we should be looking for when building that community?
Well, I think it's mainly, well, I think you can approach it a number of different ways. You can join a community like Book Camp where it's there set up for you. There's an app called Focus Mate that will pair you up with another person who wants to work at the same time, and you're just with each other via Zoom. It's a little weird because they're a complete stranger, but it can work. It can really work. I've used it successfully. Or you can start your own group,
Mm.
and get it going that way. I don't know. I mean, we're talking about accountability and co-working. We're not talking about creative collaboration. If you're after creative collaboration or collective inspiration, like that's a different kind of thing altogether. And that can be really important too. But if all you're looking for is accountability, setting a time on your calendar when a group of people are getting together can be really powerful, and not just one, but multiple of those. So that's the advice I would give. Pursue whatever means makes the most sense to you for getting that done.
I love that. I know for myself, I've had big projects where I had a lot of copy that I had to craft, maybe writing an entire campaign, and I was procrastinating or not feeling super motivated. And what I would do is in my calendar once a month, I block off 2 days where I call it like a work retreat.
Uh-huh.
Where I go away and my only job during that time is to write or to work on that one project, and I have no excuse. I'm at the place off site, wherever it might be, if it's a Starbucks, whatever. But I like the idea of building that into your calendar consistently,
Mm-hmm.
because I think if
Yeah.
we rely on those occasional times, it's
Hmm.
going to be really, really hard to keep up, especially because life always happens.
Yeah, I think also about being intentional with rewards. I have a writer who, when he was in the thick of it, he said, Chad, I told myself I couldn't turn on my phone until I got my writing done. So his phone was just off and he couldn't turn it on until he got his whatever 500 words down. Thinking that through, like that could be a useful trick.
I
Yeah.
like that. I like that a lot. I think,
Hmm.
especially the phone, right? Because that's the first instinct we have in the morning is to go onto the
Yeah.
phone. So it
Yeah.
forces you, but also it limits distractions if you don't have your phone
Yes.
as well.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
kind of double duty.
Yeah.
Amazing. So for those authors who are listening now and they've maybe got the concept and outlined it and they're in that crafting process, as they come up to the time where they're getting ready to publish, any tips or tools as they're preparing for the big moment when the book goes live?
Well, hopefully, I'm about to do a triathlon day after tomorrow,
Whew.
and I've been training. I've been training for the triathlon. So if you do the work of nurturing an audience for a period of time before you launch, just as somebody who's trained for an endurance event can show up ready to go because they've done the work, a book launch can actually be a lot of fun when, you have nurtured an audience, you've told them this is coming, and now you finally get to deliver it to them. It's the same joy you get as when you give a gift to somebody you really care about, and they open it up and they really like it. Like that's a pretty great feeling. So I wouldn't wait. I wouldn't wait to think about what am I going to do, at launch. I would back it up a little bit and I would start serving your audience for a while so that when launch day comes, you're ready, you can enjoy it. And it's going to be crazy. It always is, but at least you can enjoy it more in that situation than because the mistake that so many writers make, especially self-published writers, is they don't think about the launch at all. They don't think about marketing. They don't think about building an audience. They only think about the book. And then it's out there and they go, well, now what? Like it's not selling. Now what? Well, I'll write another one. Yes. So, and sometimes that's fine, but I think it could be you can have much more impact if you've done that work of serving an audience. Like we talked about recently, Mickey, books are about life change. They're about impact. And so in that way, the building a list and all of that happens before a book releases and even after a book releases, it's all one motion. If the important thing is making the impact, you get to do that today. You don't have to wait for your book to release. So blur the lines a little bit between writing and marketing and start serving your audience because there's nothing. I mean, it's never been easier or more accessible than it is today. We live in a remarkable time when, because of the internet, we have access to a worldwide audience. So start serving. We need you to lead us in whatever your expertise is.
I love that advice. I think we sometimes amplify the day, right? We make it into
Hmm.
this big, big thing, and we get so wrapped up in it that we don't get to enjoy it. But then the other
Yeah.
thing that you and I have spoken about before is like the book doesn't end on launch day. Like your
Right.
efforts don't just stop. It's a big party, and then now what? Like
Right.
it's a continued effort to market and get that book out there. You don't have to stop, and sometimes that's the starting point for a lot of people. Can you talk
Hmm.
maybe a little bit about anything that you've noticed, maybe mistakes that people make after the launch of the book and what we can do to set ourselves up for successful ongoing marketing of the book?
Well, I think, yeah, the mistake is thinking that a book's life is a month long.
Mm,
Let's extend that timeline to the first year and a half, 2 years. You can market your book as a new book for, I would say, at least a year, if not a year and a half. You could say, this is my new book. So, like, for me, that, like, even saying that feels like a relief. Like,
yeah.
it just takes off some of the pressure, you know. And from there, I think obviously you're going to market to your own list. But the other marketing tactic that I think is, people talk about is the juice worth the squeeze. This is a saying I hear here and there. I think one of the tactics that has juice that's worth its squeeze is marketing to influencers and borrowing other people's audiences. So what you're looking for is the win-win. what can you provide to a podcast host, for example? Because podcast hosts, Mickey will tell you, they're looking for good content. They're looking for good interviewees. So if you can show up and help them with that, and in the process, let them know about your book, well, you've reached this whole other audience. And hopefully some of you listening to this will go to my website and you'll want my book proposal template and you'll sign up. And now we have a relationship, right? Now it's my opportunity to go to take you on that journey to friend. So I think, thinking about not only the long term, but also what's sustainable. If your tactic is reaching out to influencers who have an audience that overlaps with your book's audience, what is sustainable in terms of every week doing maybe a couple of things to pitch yourself to those influencers? Make it sustainable, make it something that you really can do over the long term. And my goodness, that can have an impact. If you keep at it and you start getting on a podcast every week, that can be incredible. Not that it's all about podcasts, but they are a useful medium. So that would be my advice.
I love that. I think podcasts are kind of they're their own world, but also there's so much overlap, right? If we think of
Mm.
authorship, I mean, audiobooks and podcasts, there's so much overlap as well. So if your reader is open to reading an audiobook, they're probably open to being on a podcast or maybe listening actively to one. You can do a lot of research on your audience to figure out what podcasts they listen to and how to get on there as well. But
Mm.
I think if you're a writer and writing is your craft, and maybe you don't feel super comfortable in front of the camera on the mic, I mean,
Mm.
writing can be a tool. Guest blogging could be another tool that you can leverage too, and
Yes. Yeah.
stealing pieces of all of that work you've already done from your book, right? Don't let it go to
Yeah. And
waste.
then thinking creatively about, are there particular times of year
Mhm.
when it makes sense to do a special promotion? I was talking with a children's book author who wrote a book for children who've recently been through a loss of some kind. And she was like, how do I develop a long-term marketing strategy? And I was like, well, normally I would talk about holidays, but I don't know if that applies. And then everybody in the chat room was like, yeah, but it's at holidays that you notice who you've lost. And so I'm like, her name is Karen. I said, Karen, there you go. Like,
Yep.
those are the times to really provide a discount or a bundle of some kind, to keep it in front of people and get really creative. Now that you have the book, you can get really creative with the marketing of it, whether it's something that you package with it or a bulk purchase discount, or we're going to do a reading series where we go through the book together. So make sure you have it by this date. And I'm going to do 3 live sessions on Facebook on it. Like, you can have a lot of fun when the book's out there. So don't be afraid to get creative with your promotions.
I love that. I'm the ideas that just burst into my mind. Just kind of, it felt like so much fun, right? Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
really do get to have a lot of fun giving your book a new life, a new spin, and leveraging the events and the circumstances and the times and the triggers out there in the world as well. I love that.
Yeah.
Chad,
Yeah.
for the listeners who are dying to learn more about you, about book camp, and snag that template that you mentioned, where can they go to find you?
It's just chadrallen.com. And if you forget that, just Google Chad Allen writing and you'll find me.
I can attest to that. Writing, author, book coach, and you'll
Yeah.
pop right up at the beginning there. Love it. And
Yeah.
I'll have all of the links in the description. Chad, thank you so much for today. I so appreciate it. I feel, and I'm not even a writer, and I feel so much more confident understanding the process and the key things that really matter and
Mm.
how to let go of the rest.
Thanks for having me on, Mickey. It's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. So everyone listening, make sure to check out chadrallen.com and check the description for all the links and freebies as well. Thank you.